Good afternoon, everybody. It's been really wonderful to be here for the last day and a half. Thank you for having me, primarily for the opportunity to learn and listen, which is what I try and do at these things, and to listen to all the other people who are doing things differently and focusing on different subjects from those that interest me day to day, but that are nonetheless connected. I'm based at the Fletcher School. I won't take you through my background except to say I alternate the scholarship, the academic side, and the practitioner side, and have found that useful. And my interest, broadly speaking, is in the geopolitics and the global governance implications of the net zero transition. Not what's happening today, not what the rate of uptake on solar is today, although I pay attention to that, but what are the 10 to 20-year implications of this? Where are we going, and what is this going to have in terms of effects on the ways in which we as nations, as people, as societies have conducted business and have conducted our common life. So with that said, I've spent time with multiple hats on. I've spent time in the Security Council, in the Conference on Disarmament, and the Human Rights Council, at the COP process for the Paris Agreement, and on the Plastics Treaty process. I'm very interested in the way in which technology, policy, geopolitics play out and come together in these processes, existing processes and new processes, and frankly, processes that don't yet exist. So I asked myself, lots of beautiful photos yesterday and today of these incredible projects, usually in very nice locations, or extraordinarily impressive formula, which I could not decipher. And I asked myself, how do I beat that? This is my visual representation of the science policy interface. The photo is 40 hours old. It comes from the closing plenary of the 4th round of negotiations on an international plastics treaty in Ottawa. And it describes a 2-hour period from about 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. when this is what was happening. And your reaction to this is probably the same as my reaction to your formula yesterday, which is a little bit bewilderment. But I look at this and I can decipher it probably as precisely as some of you could decipher your formula yesterday. The layers of interests represented, the processes, the histories, how we got to this process. You have to, of course, know what they're talking about. You have to place it in a moment in time. But within that context, this becomes a picture to decipher. Just for fun, from left to right, Saudi Arabia, Iran, the European Union, Norway, India, Brazil, the US, sorry, I forgot, Palau was seated. And forgive me, I can't quite see all the way around, but these were the people who engaged in this particular conversation for about 2 hours, because the session had to be suspended, because they were not prepared to move forward with the chair's proposal on establishing one technical, science-based working group to explore one subset of the issues. This was the language that was under challenge. The white was the proposal of the chair. The red is what we ended up with. The photo I just showed you was 2 hours to add the red to the white. Now, we don't have the time, and I'd be glad to have a conversation with you afterwards if you want to get to the bottom of this one specifically, but it will give you some indication of what was happening here. There's a couple of notes, though, in background. About 50 countries led by Rwanda and Peru had hoped that another technical open-ended working group, that is, the groups that really bring the science and the technical work into a process like this, would be created to address the question of the production of primary plastic. And they had been bitterly disappointed by the absence of such a third working group. And there was a view that you could get back around to that issue through this working group on criteria on the design of plastic products, that it provided a back door through which you might be able to get back at some of this. We're not talking about actual products, we're talking about the criteria on the design of plastic products. And there were a number of countries, and you saw some of them in the previous slide, who were intent on closing that back door, sealing it shut, or at least narrowing its scope to prevent that part of the technical scientific review process from informing the next round of negotiations. So, I use the plastics treaty as an illustration of the general proposition here, which is just that as the global decarbonization process advances, even in fits and starts, which is its defining character right now, new ecological, political, social, ethical, legal problems arise and are addressed in existing or new policy processes at subnational, national, and international levels. Okay. The complex dynamics and the challenges of these processes, the actors, the motivations, the structures, and the behaviors are no less significant than those that exist on the science and innovation sides. I would say, I used to think the job was harder on the science side. I would submit to you that based on the last day and a half, the science side of the equation is easier. By its very nature, the net zero shift places new and more difficult demands on an accelerating science policy interface. I would add to that 2 comments. I think the age of climate ignorance is past us. Scientific climate ignorance is past us. We still live in an age of partial climate science denial and obstruction in pockets, and a reluctance to embrace that for the purposes of decision-making. What lies ahead, in addition to hopefully techno-optimism, of which I'm an adept, which is based on the last day and a half, the idea that science offers a series of solutions for us, I would say that is a necessary but not a sufficient condition. Our only chance going forward is going to be increasingly difficult decision-making that is ethically based. Easy decisions, shortcuts, honeymoon sort of opportunities, we are enjoying them right now, but as we move forward increasingly, and this is part of what I see in this process, the decisions and the sacrifices and the compromises are getting tougher. I would argue that this plastics process provides an interesting window into how to look at that as a parallel to the energy systems conversation that has been happening through the COPS process. So, a couple slides now about the plastics process. We will go very quickly through them. It affects everything in the life cycle. I don't need to make the argument to you. I think we can skip that part. Some of the interesting pieces around this: global recycling about 9%. So anyone who suggests that recycling is the answer to this problem, even under perfect conditions, it would be almost impossible to solve it that way. An increase in primary plastic production, 60% over the next 10, 15 years. The result, when you add up the equation, is a 90% mismanagement, an increase in waste mismanagement. It's a carbon question. Estimates vary today between 4% of the carbon budget, of global emissions today, but the projections are 19% by 2040. Here it is, the production of primary plastic. On the far side, the location of primary plastic production in the world. This is where the geopolitics begin to come in. A lot of the question behind the treaty is, what is the problem we seek to solve? Is it a pollution problem? It is certainly a pollution problem. 16,000 chemicals go into the making of plastics. An estimated 4,000, depending on who you're asking, are highly, problematic from the perspective of human health. To give you this slide down here, all the other pollutions treaties, the Montreal Protocol, Minamata Convention, the Stockholm Convention, address about 128 of a total of 4,000 chemicals. We're facing an enormous, enormous job with respect to the management of chemicals. No one's ever made a list, never mind a categorization, never mind begun to establish a framework at the international level for handling them. There are national level frameworks, but none of them are shared. A carbon problem, I mentioned this. 94% of the carbon footprint of plastics happens during the combination of the extraction of raw materials and plastics production. That itself is interesting when it comes to some of the choices that have to be made with respect to upstream versus downstream. One of the First Peoples representatives at the conference in one of their intervention made the acute point that whether you're talking about upstream or downstream, you're still talking about the same stream. And these kinds of discussions can obfuscate some of the clear connections that one is left with, nonetheless. a human health problem. This is increasingly known. The very declaration at the beginning of international negotiations has prompted a surge in research, scientific research and other research on the plastics problem. So literally year by year, we are getting better and better data on the scope and the ramifications and a sort of total view of the problem. A political economy problem. Follow the money in terms of producers of primary polymers and the relationship between oil extraction and production and plastics production and extraction. An important component because for many countries, a successful petrochemical industry or sector is their insurance policy against the expected loss of revenues in the energy sector. And when a plastics treaty comes along at this stage in that process and begins to call into question the profits that are seen as the insurance policy against losses in energy, then there is fundamentally more resistance to it, which is something else that we're beginning to see in this particular process. This one is one of my favorite ones more recently from a World Wildlife Fund report 4 months ago. 1 kilo of plastic costs $1 to get it to market. For high income countries, the cost over the lifetime of that kilo of plastic is $19. For low income countries, it's somewhere between $150 and $200. So from a purely national developmental perspective, the imperative on this is enormous, but it's not something that decision makers are willing to look at yet. We could go through a number of the aspects of this, and I want to take you back, having explored a couple of them, to that question, to looking back at this photo, to understanding what is behind it in terms of both the science policy interface and the decision-making process, and a lot of the application of the technologies that we've been talking about for the last day and a half. Behind the left shoulder of each one of these national negotiators are a set of ministries. Their Ministry of the Interior, their Ministry of Industry, their Defense Department. Those are reference made to defense and to geopolitics, but also their climate ministries, their health ministries. On their right shoulder, behind their right shoulder, indigenous peoples, affected communities, science communities, and all the rest of it. And the pressure that is coming through this picture is the sum of all of those interests and pressures that are all coming together into this process, which frankly is very messy and very frustrating. I'll pass this one off. And I will just close up by saying, this is a 2.5-year process. I personally find it difficult to see how it could conclude in time successfully, given the rate at which it has been progressing so far. There's also considerable reason to believe that the core issues, the 3 biggest issues, which are the production of primary plastic, chemicals of concern, and what to do with problematic plastic products, are 3 issues that a number of key states are not ready to deal with in any significant international fashion. Instead, we're looking at product design, we're looking at the end-of-life waste management, and possibly the listing of criteria that nations could use in order to carry on the national process of regulating chemicals. These are more modest aims. They're achievable, perhaps, over that process. We will lose the opportunity for a lot of what business wants, business other than the petrochemicals. That is, all the brands see very clearly where this is coming, where this is going. Their interest is for a stronger treaty, interestingly. The problem is they're pitted against the petrochemical industries that hold the purse for which many governments are going to rely on in the next 10 or 20 years.
And that is a beautiful summary, Joshua. Thank you so much.